Hey guys, I hope that you've been doing well and staying busy. It's hard to believe that it's been a whole month since we last met in person. We miss you all and we're counting down the time until we're back together again. Don't forget that you can reach out to us with any questions by sending us an email or a message through any of our social media. This week we're starting a new series called Leaving Egypt. We're going to follow the Israelites as they started their journey led by Moses to the Promised Land. We'll read about the trials and the temptations that the Israelites faced along the way. Even though this trip took place thousands of years ago, I find that we can still relate to many of these situations today. So in the Old Testament, we see God's chosen people, the Israelites, experiencing a massive move of freedom. Their entire population had been made slaves to the Egyptian people for years, doing hard labor each day and being totally oppressed. So God sent a man named Moses to remove them from slavery and lead them across the known world to the Promised Land that he had designed for them. But almost immediately after leaving Egypt, the Israelites experienced a major shift in their attitudes, and it led to some big problems for them. Let's follow along in Exodus chapter 14 and 16. 14:12 says, "Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." 16:1-3 says, "The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt, in the desert the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, 'If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death.'" The Israelites had just seen God do incredible things. They walked through a sea on dry land. There were plagues like bugs and frogs and blood water that God used to aggravate all the Egyptians. Yet when they were faced with the reality of following after God to the Promised Land destination, what did they do? Started complaining. While they are offered freedom, it comes with the responsibility of obeying God, and they cry out for their former insignificant lives of slavery. Here's the truth about sin. Sin is simply to put choices and opportunities in our normal daily path that become natural and desirable to us. It's all around us. We get a few miles down the road and start thinking about the life we had before Christ, completely forgetting about the painful consequences and regret that sin brings into our lives. It's at this point in the journey that we must remember an amazing truth about leaving Egypt. Christ didn't die on a cross to ruin our fun, but to eliminate the consequences of sin. You see, to run right back to the slavery of sin after being granted freedom forever is like turning our back on God, and it's exactly what Satan wants. We have been given an incredible gift that was purchased at an unrepayable price. To have a taste of this freedom and then wish it away, or try to experience both freedom and sin, makes a mockery out of God's grace and his never-ending mercy. You see, we don't intend to run from God, but the fact remains that when we leave sin behind, it will always call out our name. It doesn't forget us. Maybe just 5 minutes into the journey, or maybe 5 years down, at some point we'll be tempted to march right back to our chains and give control back to sin. God's plan begins where our longing for sin ends. If you claim to be Christ's follower but still have a longing for sin, you're missing out on experiencing the abundant life that God desires for all of us to live. When we long for the past, we'll never truly experience the present and miss out completely on the future. And the Apostle Paul unpacks this concept beautifully for us in his letter to the Roman church. You remember all those Roman readings we did? Here's some more. Romans chapter 6, 20-22 says, "When you were slaves to sin, you were free from the control of righteousness. What benefit did you reap at that time from the things you are now ashamed of? Those things result in death. But now that you have been set free from sin and have become slaves to God, the benefit you reap lands to holiness, and the result is an eternal life." The way Paul describes it can seem like we are doomed to be slaves, no matter what. But did you notice the huge difference between the two? When we remain slaves to sin, our lives are headed for a destination that none of us want, and that's death. That's where the consequences come in. When we live life locked in with sin, we earn death. That's why leaving Egypt isn't only just a good idea, it's the only hope. When God provides us a way out, it's not a demand that we have to stop having all the fun so we can follow His rules and be boring. It's an offer to live a life that's set apart from sin and leads to eternal life, the greatest gift of all. This is the greatest journey that we can ever take, and it begins with a commitment to leave our sin behind us. 2 Corinthians chapter 5:21 says, God made Him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. The ticket to leave Egypt was a costly one. Jesus traded His righteousness for our rags. Let today be the day that you let God in and allow Him to have control of your life. The promise of God that the life He gives you in return is an eternal one. Maybe today you've been reminded that your heart is easily persuaded back into its homeland of sin. We all struggle with that. Remember that God, who is powerful enough to take you out of Egypt, is powerful enough to keep you from returning. You just need to ask. Thanks for watching, and remember to tune in on Thursday to continue this journey along with Alyssa. We'll see ya.